Chosen one, you survived what was meant to cut you down and leave you bleeding in public. A humiliation ritual was set in motion, designed to break your spirit while others watched. It failed. Your discernment saved your life. That is the sick truth now coming into focus. Your spirit was too clean for the dirty games they were playing around you. Your presence in their spaces created a problem they couldn't articulate. You walked in with a pure heart, and that purity exposed every compromise they had made, every lie they told in mirrors, every manipulation they dressed up as loyalty. You didn't have to say a word. Your energy alone made people feel convicted. That's why they had to take action against you. But lock this into your mind right now. This story doesn't end with you defeated. It ends with you dangerous. What they meant to destroy you is exactly what trained you to see the next move before it gets made. Your humiliation was the biggest mistake they could have made. You walked into rooms thinking you were building connections. You showed up believing the words they spoke to your face. But behind the scenes, they had an agreement you didn't know existed. A silent pact between people who had already decided you were the problem. You were the offering at a ceremony nobody explained, the sacrifice they needed to keep their false peace intact. The public humiliation you endured wasn't correction, it wasn't discipline. This was a spiritual assassination attempt designed to break your self-image. Their goal was to make you question your reality, to doubt your memory, to hear their voices every time you looked in the mirror. Their judgment was supposed to replace your discernment. For a moment, it almost worked. You started wondering if maybe you were too sensitive, too much, too complicated, but something inside you wouldn't fully submit to their narrative. That something was your discernment, and it was recording everything. You don't just experience intuition like normal people. You have spiritual radar that picks up threats before they fully form. You noticed the fake laughs that didn't reach their eyes. You caught the micro-expressions that revealed hidden contempt. While they performed for crowds, you were watching, studying, decoding. That's what saved your life. Your discernment wasn't paranoia. It was divine data being downloaded in real time. You saw patterns before they completed. You felt danger before it struck. You moved when your spirit said move, not when your mind had proof. That's why you survived what destroys others. You trusted the alarm system they tried to convince you was broken, and now you see everything. But let me tell you what this means going forward. You're not the same person who walked into that room. You've been upgraded, refined, sharpened. What they meant for evil literally trained you to operate on a level beyond their reach. You're not recovering from what happened. You're rising because of it. Most people treat intuition like a suggestion, but for chosen ones, this is a survival system. Your discernment doesn't whisper. It hits like an alarm, like radar detecting things before words are spoken. You've learned to trust this because it's never been wrong. People don't understand how you know things before they manifest. They call you suspicious, too sensitive, judgmental, but those voices have never had to survive betrayal wearing a friendly face. You have, so your discernment sharpened by necessity. You didn't just sense bad energy. You tracked it. You felt tone shifts, hesitation in speech, tension in silence. Your escape from their traps wasn't luck. It was real-time divine intelligence. You moved when your spirit said go. That's why you survived. Discernment saved you from relationships that looked perfect but were poisoned underneath, from deals that sounded amazing but were cages in disguise, from environments dressed as opportunities but were actually altars with your name already written on them. The humiliation didn't break you. It revealed how accurate your discernment had been the entire time. You saw through their masks when you had no proof. When you didn't have evidence, your spirit had the pattern. That's how chosen ones move. You don't guess. You know. And when you know, you don't need to prove anything. You just leave, quietly, strategically, alive, with your power intact. What you experienced wasn't rejection. It was a spiritual scan. Life wasn't pushing you out randomly. It was examining every connection, every belief, every hidden wound you carried. The humiliation was surgical, precise. Heaven designed it to expose what couldn't come with you into your next level. Every time they left you out, mocked you, isolated you, discarded you, it hurt beyond measure. But it was also revealing truth you couldn't see on your own. You thought people were changing, but the truth is simpler and more painful. What you witnessed was finally being shown what had been there all along. That forced separation wasn't punishment, it was purification. The loyalty you gave wasn't being matched. The love you offered wasn't being understood. Heaven had to show you in a way you couldn't rationalize away. This is what most people don't get about elevation. It requires exposure. Exposure doesn't always look like people getting caught in their lies. Sometimes it looks like you finally seeing clearly. The ritual had to be public so you'd stop making excuses in private. It had to be loud so you couldn't ignore it. You didn't lose relationships. You lost illusions. You didn't lose opportunities. You lost distractions disguised as destiny. What you gained was clarity that cuts through manipulation like light through darkness. You gained the ability to spot fake smiles from across rooms. You gained the courage to trust your gut the first time, not after being destroyed multiple times. You gained self-respect at a cost most people will never pay. And here's the power move nobody expected. You're not bitter, you're better, you're not wounded, you're weaponized. They tried to bury you, but everyone forgot you were a seed. If this resonates with your inner knowing, hype this video to help fellow chosen ones find their way here. Let me reveal the next layer. Physical death was never their goal. They wanted something more insidious. They wanted you to stay alive but spiritually paralyzed, doubting every instinct, second-guessing everything you knew to be true, because as long as you were confused, they could maintain control. Their goal wasn't your death. It was your disconnection from your inner compass. Some enemies want to destroy completely, but the dangerous ones want to contain. They arrive smiling. They offer help while planting doubt. Every compliment they give carries a twist. Every joke they make delivers a sting. They study you until they identify what makes you powerful. Then they slowly convince you that your power is actually a problem. You start shrinking, dimming your light, and you think it's humility, but it's programming. Their attempt wasn't to make you explode. Their strategy was to make you disappear quietly, but your discernment kicked in just in time. That uncomfortable feeling, that voice whispering, "This isn't right," that's what saved you. The moment they attempted public humiliation against you, they accidentally exposed their entire network. People you never spoke to suddenly had opinions. Strangers started treating you like a problem. Whispers spread like wildfire, and it made no sense until it did. What you experienced wasn't just personal betrayal. It was the unmasking of a hidden system, a spiritual cartel of manipulation and gossip, and your awakening set it on fire. You became their threat the moment you stopped playing small, when you started questioning things, moving different, protecting your peace. That's when they escalated, not because you hurt anyone, but because you stopped allowing yourself to be handled, and that shook their foundations. Behind the drama was a group that had silently agreed to never change, never grow, never face truth. You disrupted that agreement just by being honest. The public humiliation was supposed to isolate you, make you the example, but it exposed their system instead. It showed you who was secretly talking, who was pretending to be neutral while feeding their fires. That's not coincidence, that's coordination, and they coordinated out of fear, fear that you'd reveal what they had buried. You became a mirror nobody wanted to look into, so they chose humiliation to redirect attention, but they showed their hand in the process. You didn't just survive, you decoded everything. Now you know what you're dealing with wasn't individuals, it was a system, and you broke it without even trying. That's the power of someone who refuses to break themselves. The testing didn't happen out of curiosity, it happened out of terror. Terror of what you carried inside. Your presence revealed truth without you trying to reveal anything. You came in with a pure heart and clear intentions. That alone disturbed every false system they had built. You were evidence that healing is real, that forgiveness without bitterness exists, that someone can walk through hell and stay soft-hearted. You didn't just speak truth, you embodied it. And for people surviving on manipulation and control, your presence wasn't comforting, it was confronting. You didn't try to expose anyone, but your life exposed everything they were hiding. You were a mirror nobody asked for, so they had to test you, not to understand you, to discredit you. They needed confirmation about whether your light was real or another illusion. When you didn't crack under pressure, when you didn't retaliate, when you kept your dignity after they stripped everything else away, that's when everyone knew you couldn't be converted, controlled, or corrupted. That's why they attached labels to you. Too much, too sensitive, too deep. It wasn't because you actually were these things. It was because you were too real for the game they were playing. You didn't fit the mold they needed, so they tried to break you. But your spirit stayed intact, and they hated that, because you proved truth is livable by living it. In a world that rewards fakeness, someone who can't be bought or manipulated is dangerous. That's why they treated you like the enemy. Not because you were evil, but because you were incorruptible. Nothing threatens deception like a soul that refuses to twist. Watch how they escalated when their quiet sabotage failed. Everything started behind closed doors, whispered conversations, careful setups to make you question yourself. They tried subtle manipulation first, because it was safer. They thought if they twisted reality slightly, you'd self-destruct without anyone lifting a finger publicly. But you didn't break. You noticed. You adjusted. You kept showing up. And that bothered them more than they expected. You didn't fall into their traps. Their shade didn't work. Their forgetfulness didn't shake you. You started moving different. That's when they panicked, because private sabotage depends entirely on your ignorance. Once you started paying attention, they lost their grip, so they had to change strategy. If quiet damage couldn't destroy you, public humiliation might finish the job. They made a show of your name. They exaggerated your flaws. They pulled your past into irrelevant conversations. It wasn't about truth. It was about volume. Loud enough to drown your version, bold enough to shake anyone in your corner. Their goal wasn't just embarrassment. Their goal was to shame you into permanent silence. But instead of breaking, you endured. Instead of hiding, you got stronger. Instead of defending yourself with noise, you let their performance expose itself. And it did expose itself. People started noticing their obsession, the lengths they were taking, because when someone works that hard to destroy someone who's silent, questions start arising. The stage they built to shame you ended up spotlighting their obsession instead. You kept your soul intact. You outlasted their circus, which proved what they feared most. You were never the problem. You were proof that they had lost control. Simple embarrassment was never the endgame. Emotional crushing was their true objective. Their goal wasn't making you look bad temporarily. It was making you turn on yourself permanently. They wanted to bury you in shame so deep that even alone in quiet rooms, your mind would replay their attacks forever. They wanted their voices to become your inner dialogue. That was the ritual. Psychological suffocation dressed as drama. But you didn't drown. You adapted. While they were throwing you into emotional depths, you weren't just sinking. You were evolving. You started breathing where you shouldn't survive. You recognized their gaslighting, their guilt-tripping, their twisted truth. You stopped arguing with their closed minds, stopped explaining to people who needed you guilty, and something wild happened. You grew gills. You survived toxic environments without becoming toxic yourself. You thought clearly. While they dragged your name, you found peace surrounded by their chaos. While they expected shame to destroy you, it trained you instead. Your mind got sharper. Your emotional intelligence leveled up. You saw their patterns before formation. Situations that used to shake you became data. Rooms that triggered anxiety became arenas where you practiced staying grounded. That's what they never expected. They thought shame would sink you, but it made you a deep diver. You didn't just survive their manipulation, you decoded it. You built resilience in silence. Now you don't panic when water rises. You don't fight currents uselessly. You read them, because you've been trained where others drown. When someone tries to manipulate you now, they don't understand that you learned to breathe down there. You're not afraid of the deep anymore. You are the deep. Here's the truth about what they called love. They dressed everything up as loyalty and family, words that make hearts soften and guards drop. You believed it because you wanted belonging, but beneath the surface was something darker. What they called love was actually a ritual, a performance designed to keep you trapped and small. You were never meant to grow beyond certain boundaries. They were grooming you for sacrifice. Slowly, while they smiled and pretended everything was for your good, you didn't see it at first. Their whispers of "we care" sounded comforting, but your discernment caught what your mind couldn't accept. You began seeing the pattern. Every concern was a leash, every help was a trap, every love was a mask. They weren't building you up, they were tearing you down bit by bit, all while they convinced you this was devotion. It wasn't loyalty, it was control. It wasn't family, it was a cage. The knife they were preparing wasn't metaphorical. It was the slow death of your potential, your dreams, your peace. They wanted you to believe they had your best interest at heart, so you wouldn't resist. But your awakened eyes saw through it all. You recognized the ritual, sacrifice disguised as support, submission wrapped in smiles and empty promises. This revelation shook your foundation, but it set you free. Once you saw their truth, you stopped playing their game. You stopped giving power away disguised as love. That's when you began to truly live. The knife was meant to kill your spirit, but discernment saved you. You survived the ritual. You shattered their illusion. Now you walk away unbroken, wiser, and fiercely alive. Starseeds, they never expected this. The technology used to suppress consciousness has been reverse-engineered, and Destiny Engine is the result. What was once used against humanity is now your ascension weapon. You can now MK Ultra yourself into 5D superpowers. Destiny Engine bypasses the conscious mind and rewrites the source code directly. Reality bends faster. Synchronicities stack. Your nervous system upgrades to a higher bandwidth. Put on headphones. Press play. That's all. For $1 you switch sides of history. Click the link in the description. The takeover is internal. Now understand what this really was. This wasn't bullying. It was spiritual initiation disguised as social rejection. A brutal rite of passage few understand until survival happens. What the world called humiliation was the beginning of your anointing. Real elevation often comes wrapped in public shame. The deeper the fall, the higher the rise. You didn't stumble into this. You were chosen for it, coded for it, designed to carry it. When they singled you out, excluded you, tried to break you down publicly, it wasn't random cruelty. It was deliberate spiritual separation. Most people are built to blend in, to follow crowds, to play safe. But you were never made for that mold. You were forged to stand apart, to walk the solitary path where royalty walks alone. The ritual was marking you as different, whether anyone knew it or not. That public shame was the world trying to silence your light, but it amplified everything instead. When they pushed you out, you learned to lean into yourself in ways others never have to. You developed resilience that only comes through isolation, clarity that only comes through rejection, strength that only forges in humiliation's fire. This was your invitation to ascend, not as a victim, but as a warrior, a leader, a chosen one. The pain is real, but it's also a crucible, refining your spirit, separating gold from dross. They wanted to make you invisible. The result was making you unforgettable. You were never meant to be just another face. You were coded to stand alone, and in that solitude, you found your throne. They used that label like a weapon: paranoid, emotional, sensitive, delusional. Those words weren't honest descriptions. Those were shields protecting their fragile illusions. They threw those words at you not because they believed them, but because they feared your clarity. Your ability to see through their lies was intolerable. Calling you crazy was their isolation strategy, cutting you off before anyone could hear your side. Ancient tactics: discredit the messenger so the message dies. But your so-called crazy was really their code for "we can't control you." They hated that you wouldn't fall in line, that your discernment was too sharp. You didn't just question their stories, you saw through the cracks and refused to pretend. Now their silence is loudest, fear disguised as calm. They're quiet because truth is on your side, and their grip is slipping. Silence can't hide the cracks anymore. They labeled you crazy to hide their weakness, but your sanity is the mirror reflecting their lies. And that reflection terrifies them more than anything. Watch what happened with your restraint. They mistook your silence, your calm, your choice not to engage for weakness. They thought pushing you meant they had the upper hand, that you were broken or too small to fight. They made a completely wrong assessment. Your restraint wasn't surrender, it was strategy, pure calculated strategy. You didn't need to throw punches. You didn't need to shout accusations. You observed. You collected evidence with your eyes and heart. You let truth do the heavy lifting. You were an investigator in plain sight, watching their every move, every slip, every hidden motive revealing itself. You saw through their masks, noted their inconsistencies, stored everything like a secret ledger. While they tried to trap you in drama, you were building your case silently. You understood something profound. Sometimes the loudest power comes not from noise, but from steady, unshakable truth waiting to be revealed. They thought you were powerless because your reactions didn't match their expectations. They assumed your silence meant defeat, but your silence was the calm before the storm. The quiet confidence of someone knowing truth doesn't need forcing. It surfaces on its own timeline. You trusted time was on your side, so you played the long game. Now truth is coming out exactly as you knew it would, surfacing in conversations, in whispered confessions, in undeniable facts they can't hide. Best part, you haven't lifted a finger. The more they buried it, the more it bubbled up. Unstoppable, undeniable. Your restraint wasn't weakness, it was wisdom, and it's winning. You went through humiliation's fire and lived, but you weren't just a victim. You were an eyewitness to their whole operation. You saw exactly how their cycle worked. Isolate the target, tear them down with ridicule, twist their mind with manipulation, then act like gracious savior when cracking happens. It's a calculated system designed to break spirits and maintain control, a program running on autopilot. But you refused to be the broken link. You didn't just survive, you understood. You peeled back their layers and decoded the ritual in real time. You saw their patterns, how they fed on shame to keep people trapped. Their system depends on silence, confusion, and eroded self-worth. But your clarity cut through like a blade. You recognized their love was a weapon, their loyalty was a leash, their concern was a trap. Now you hold something more powerful than just your healing. You hold the blueprint, the manual for dismantling toxic cycles. Your experience isn't just a pain story, it's a map showing others how to spot traps, resist manipulation, walk out without losing themselves. Your survival is a beacon, a guide for those still caught in the program, showing the way out. You transformed what should have destroyed you into power and knowledge. That's the real victory. The program that tried controlling you now has a crack, a vulnerability exposed by your resilience. Your story isn't about making it through, it's about breaking the cycle for everyone coming after you. You didn't just survive the humiliation ritual, you became the blueprint for freedom itself. They invested so much energy into destroying you, they coordinated attacks, they held meetings about you, they developed strategy about how to take you down most effectively, they made you their project, their mission, their focus, and after all that investment, after all that energy spent, after all those resources deployed, you're stronger than you were before they started. That's not just failure, that's complete reversal. They didn't just fail to break you, they accidentally forged you into something more powerful, and now they're dealing with something they never prepared for. The person they targeted for destruction is walking around as living proof that their power wasn't as real as they pretended. You're a walking contradiction to their narrative. You're evidence that their system can be survived, that their attacks can be endured, that their worst efforts can be overcome, and other people are starting to notice. Other people are starting to ask questions. If they did all that to you and you're still standing, maybe their power was never real. Maybe their control was always theater. Maybe their ability to destroy was always overestimated. This is what terrifies them most. You're not just surviving, you're exposing them simply by existing. Every day you wake up strong, you're dismantling their mythology. Every time someone sees you thriving, their legend dies a little more. You've become the thing they feared most. Not an enemy who fights them directly, but someone who proves they can be overcome simply by refusing to stay down. Watch what happens when people who tried to destroy you realize you're unbreakable. First comes shock, pure disbelief that their plan didn't work. They check and double-check their methods. Did we do everything right? Did we miss something? How is this person still functioning? Then comes the questioning, the doubt that creeps into their confidence. If we couldn't break someone like them, who can we actually break? Was our power always this limited? Have we been fooling ourselves all along? Then comes something you need to understand clearly. They start fearing you, not because you threatened them, not because you're coming after them, but because you represent something they can't control. You're proof that chosen ones can survive their worst attacks. You're evidence that discernment wins over deception. You're a living example that spiritual strength outmatches manipulative tactics, and this fear makes them dangerous in a new way, because now they're not attacking to break you. They're attacking to validate themselves. They need you to fail eventually, to prove they're still powerful. They need you to crack somewhere down the line to reassure themselves that their methods work, just slower than expected. Let me show you something about the questions they're asking behind closed doors. How is this person not destroyed? How are they functioning? How are they moving forward? How are they maintaining peace? And the scariest question of all, what if our power was never as real as we believed? These questions eat at them, because they built their entire identities on being able to break people, on being able to control narratives, on being able to determine who succeeds and who fails in their circles. But you've disrupted that entire identity. You're the person who survived their verdict. You're the one who walked away from their sentence. You're the evidence that their judgments aren't final, and that makes you dangerous in ways they never anticipated. Not because you're attacking them, but because you're proof that they can be survived. You're a testimony they can't silence. You're a witness they can't discredit. Here's what your strength is doing right now to everyone who participated in your humiliation. It's making them uncomfortable with themselves. Because deep down, conscience hasn't completely died in most people, and seeing someone they targeted for destruction not only surviving, but thriving, creates cognitive dissonance they can't resolve. Either they were wrong about you, or they're wrong about themselves. Either you didn't deserve what they did, or they're not the good people they pretend to be. Most will choose to double down on their narrative about you, rather than face the truth about themselves. But that doubling down comes from a place of desperation now, not power. They're not attacking from strength, they're defending from weakness. They're not trying to prove you're bad, they're trying to prove they're not monsters. And the harder they try, the more obvious it becomes that they're trying to convince themselves more than anyone else. You don't break the way normal people break, not because you have superhuman strength, but because you're connected to something they don't understand. You draw strength from a source they can't cut off. You receive direction from a voice they can't drown out. You find peace in a place they can't disturb, and that makes you functionally unbreakable by their methods. They can humiliate you publicly, but they can't touch your private peace. They can destroy your reputation, but they can't destroy your character. They can turn people against you, but they can't turn you against yourself. And that's what has them shocked beyond words. They threw their best attacks and hit something they couldn't damage, like punching a pillar of light. The light doesn't fight back. It doesn't need to. It just keeps shining. And eventually, everyone sees who was really in darkness. They're learning that the system can be survived, that coordinated attacks can be endured, that public humiliation isn't the end of the story. They're watching you and thinking, if they made it through that, maybe I can make it through this. You've become hope for people who thought there was no hope. You've become proof for people who needed proof. You've become a path for people who couldn't see the way out. And the people who tried to destroy you know this. They see their former power evaporating every time someone looks at you and gets encouraged. They feel their influence dying every time someone uses your example to stand up to them. You're not just surviving, you're creating a blueprint, and that blueprint is being downloaded by everyone who's tired of living under their control. This is why they're so shocked. They didn't just fail to break one person, they accidentally created a symbol, a living testimony, a walking example that their worst fears are true. They're not invincible, they're not untouchable, their power isn't as real as they need people to believe, and you're the proof walking around destroying their illusion just by existing in strength. Here's what happens next. They'll try to minimize your strength. They'll claim you weren't that hurt anyway. They'll pretend they went easy on you. They'll rewrite history to make it seem like they didn't really try that hard. Because acknowledging that they gave you their best shot and failed means acknowledging something they can't psychologically handle. So watch for the revision. The attempt to change the narrative about what happened. That's not strength on their part. That's damage control. That's fear wearing the mask of indifference. Your strength has them questioning everything they thought they knew about power, and that's exactly where they need to be. Confused, uncertain, doubting their own methods, because people who are certain of their power will use it without hesitation, but people who've seen their power fail will hesitate, will second guess, will wonder if it's worth trying again. Your survival has put doubt where there used to be arrogant confidence, and that doubt protects the next person they might have targeted. You didn't just save yourself, you weakened their system for everyone who comes after you. That's what chosen ones do. You don't just escape the trap, you damage it on the way out so it can't catch others as easily. You don't just survive the attack, you expose their weapons so others know what they're facing. You don't just heal from the wounds, you become medicine for people with similar injuries. Welcome to your throne, chosen one. Your humiliation is over, your reign has just begun, and the shock on their faces as they watch you rise is just the beginning of what's coming. Because you're not done growing, you're not done healing, you're not done becoming, and every level you reach from here is another reminder that they never had the power to stop you. They only had the power to reveal what you were made of, and what you're made of is unbreakable, unshakable, unstoppable. They questioned your strength and got their answer. You're stronger than anything they could ever throw at you, and that's a lesson they'll never forget. Your survival isn't just about you anymore. Your strength isn't just for you anymore. Your peace isn't just your peace 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 anymore. Your peace isn't survival Gerowity fime. Why Wayne Coggins still peace. Under butter your infine so not wait till dime win 5. It's the powerful peace and hose to made. You've become the blueprint, the map, the testimony, the proof, and everyone who's still trapped in systems you escaped is watching you, learning from you, drawing strength from you, finding hope through you. You survived what was meant to break you completely, and now you're helping others survive what was meant to break them. That's the full circle. That's the completion. That's the purpose of everything you went through, not just to save yourself, but to light the way for everyone still in the darkness you escaped. Your discernment saved your life. Your restraint proved your strength. Your silence spoke louder than words could. Your survival rewrote the story they tried to write for you. This is your truth. This is your power. This is your testimony. You are the chosen one who refused to be broken, and your light will never be dimmed again.